Greetings. I call this meeting of the Saco City Council to order for Monday, October 18, 2021. Let the record reflect that the time is now 6:30. With that, moving on, all of the councilors are present, including the city administrator, Mr. Canrath. That brings us to item 3, Pledge of Allegiance. You're all invited to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Moving on to item 4, general, there are 2 items on here, but at this time I'd like to add an additional item. And at this moment in time, I would just like to have a moment of silence for the passing of former Secretary of State, Colin Powell. So if you just kind of all bow your heads and do a moment of silence. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. With that, we will move on to recognizing Harbor Master Day. Harbor Master Appreciation Day was October 8th. Dan Chadbourne has been the Saco's Harbor Master since 2011. Dan is a full-time fisherman and certified diver. When he is not fishing, Dan can be found reading at the pier, and during a storm, Dan rides out the weather near the water, making sure the pier is safe. Dan shows a tremendous dedication to his job and to Camp Ellis, and the community is fortunate to have him in this position. So thank you, Dan Chadbourne, Harbor Master for City of Saco. On October 9th, a vaccine clinic was held at the Saco Fire Station, Northern Light Home Care and Hospice, to host a flu/Pfizer booster shot drive-through clinic. This opportunity was through a collaboration between the Saco Fire Department, Age Friendly Saco. The event served our community by giving 129 COVID booster shots, 35 regular flu shots, 31 flu shots to those 65 and older, 2 flu mists, and we just want to thank Northern Light, Age Friendly Saco, and the Saco Fire Department for hosting this great event. Bringing us to item 5, committee correspondence to council. Any committee correspondence at this time? Councilor Johnston?
Thank you. Just wanted to get the information out there that on Wednesday night, October 20th at 6:30, the C.K. Burns School, there will be the Future of Saco Schools construction forum that will be put on by the superintendent and Oak Point. So that's a public forum for the members of the public to come and kind of weigh in on their ideas, and primarily it's an opportunity for Oak Point to explain the state construction process. That's also will be on Zoom, and that link is on the school's website. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any further committee correspondence to council? Moving on to item 6, public comment. There's a couple of folks that have signed up. First, we will hear from Molly Donlin. Again, for speakers, please state your name, address for the record.
Good evening, Saco. My name's Molly Donlin of 14 Wilson Street in Biddeford. I am the program director for Saco Main Street, and I am here to get you pumped up about this weekend's Pumpkin Harvest Festival. We have a full day of events lined up, starting with dinosaurs and your kids' favorite movie villains, followed by a performance from our local dance groups. Both of them will be there. Variety acts with magicians and jugglers, musical performances, and more. We'll have a pie eating contest, which some of the folks in front of me will be a part of. Mayor Doyle, I heard you like blueberry pie. Kids of all ages can come and enjoy the games and activities set up along Main Street. Costumes are strongly encouraged. Take a photo in our costume contest photo booth and be entered to win some great prizes. As always, the event is free to enjoy, rain or shine. The festival runs this Saturday from 11 to 4. Main Street will be closed to traffic from 9:30 to 5, so plan your route accordingly. We'll see you there, and remember, Saco, it's happening.
Thank you, Molly. Up next is Daniel Avila.
Good evening, members of the council. My name is Daniel Avila. I live at 15 Holly Street in Scarborough. I am here as a business person with my colleague Peter Mahar. We are asking here you tonight to consider an additional revision to a moratorium which you are going to vote on tonight. As two members of the public who are interested in perpetrating economic development and job opportunities for your city, we ask, again, that you modify your opinions on this medical marijuana moratorium that you're going to see later on tonight. Medical marijuana isn't actually the target of the issue here. It was more of an adult use issue. And with the moratorium in place, legitimate businesses such as ourselves are prevented from opening a storefront that could easily make about $300,000 a year and hire staff of 15 or more. The moratorium is something that members of the city have been working on diligently. I know Jason has been as well, and you know, we've worked with the police chief and zoning and the fire chief and whatnot to get things going. But this moratorium that happens to be a blanket moratorium covers all aspects of marijuana, even those that are properly zoned, such as ours. Again, please consider revising the moratorium to allow legitimate businesses such as ourselves to operate. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Up next is Hannah King.
Members of the council, Mayor Doyle, my name is Hannah King. I'm a partner of the law firm of Drummond Woodsum, and I'm here tonight on behalf of Cannabis Cure Dispensaries, which is located at 247 Main Street. Cannabis Cure Dispensaries currently has a conditional use approval for a registered dispensary pending before the planning board. They had their first review by the planning board at the September 21st meeting. At that meeting, the planning board deemed their application to be complete and went through 8 of the 9 conditions for conditional use approval, determining that the application met them. At 9:30 at night at that meeting, they decided to table the review until the next meeting, which is scheduled for tomorrow. And so I'm here tonight on the moratorium issue to ask you to either, one, carve out conditional use approval applications that are currently pending before the planning board from your moratorium, or to vote not to extend the moratorium because the moratorium itself and any extension is a violation of state law. The reason why we're requesting that you carve out Cannabis Cure Dispensary is that even though we are pending before the planning board and have had a substantive review, there is some confusion over what the impact of the moratorium will have on that application. You can clear that up tonight by saying that any pending applications are not subject to the moratorium going forward. In addition to that, the reason why this is a violation of state law is that while municipalities can impose moratoria, they can only do so when there is a necessity. And necessity is defined by state law. Specifically, there has to be, the necessity has to be because the application of existing comprehensive plan, land use ordinances, regulations, or other applicable laws are inadequate to prevent serious public harm from residential, commercial, or industrial developments in the affected geographic areas. Under your, the initial moratorium, but also the emergency ordinance, there are 2 reasons listed for why the moratorium is necessary. The first is that because in 2007, the moratorium on adult use marijuana businesses expired. As is expressed in your memo from staff tonight, because of state law, because nobody is allowed to cite an adult use marijuana business within the city of Saco until you, the city council, have amended or adopted an ordinance to allow it. It's not a risk. You haven't done that. there isn't a prior ordinance or an existing ordinance that allows adult use marijuana businesses, so they can't site here. So there's no necessity. The second reason is, and I quote, "The rezoning may have accidentally expanded the areas of the city where marijuana-related uses are allowed as either a conditional or permitted use." That statement is false. Since 2010, registered dispensaries have been a conditional use in your downtown district. Since 2016, registered caregivers have been a permitted use in your industrial zone. The rezoning that was voted on in 2021 continued that. Registered dispensaries in the rezoning are a conditional use in the downtown district, and caregivers are a permitted use in the industrial zone. There was no expansion. And if you do extend the moratorium tonight under state law, you do have to find that there is a necessity, and the necessity continues. And I suggest that it would be very difficult to find that there is a necessity where these uses have been permitted for registered dispensaries in the downtown 15 years, or I'm sorry, over a decade, 11 years, and registered caregivers in the industrial zone for 6. So I thank you for your time and attention tonight.
Thank you. That ends those that have signed up for public comment. If there's any person that would like to speak before the council that has not signed up, please come forward and be heard.
Good evening. My name is Jane Karen, 264 Lincoln Street in Saco. Thank you all for allowing me this time to speak. And I am commenting about this moratorium that's going to be voted on this evening, and the fact that the public hearing at the planning board was a very lengthy one, the last meeting in September, and there is another one scheduled. It's been extended to tomorrow evening. The biggest concern, I believe, from a lot of the individuals, the citizens, is the distance from schools and the definition of schools, whether it's nursery schools, Fairfield, Burns, other schools. And that, I think, is a critical area that the council has to concern themselves with. The moratorium is to allow the city of Saco to define exactly how they want medical and or, personal use marijuana to be sold or dispensed in this city. And I think that time has to be taken and clearly defined for the citizens prior to allowing dispensaries to be approved, the administrative appeal or zoning approval. So that is extremely important, and I urge all of you to really consider that strongly. That's the citizens' voice, and it's very, very important. I thank you.
Thank you. Any further public comment? Moving on from public comment to item 7, approval of the minutes for September 20th and October 4th. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Councilor Hatch, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor McPhail. Any discussion on approval of the minutes for September 20th and October 4th? Roll call vote to approve the minutes. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Brings us to item 8, consent items. There are 4. A combined massage therapist and establishment license for Hillary Mitchell Clark. Item B, confirm appointments to the Registration Appeals Board. Item C, notice of election for the general and referendum election for November 2nd, 2021. And item D, confirm the mayor's appointments to the Arts Commission of David Plavin and Michael Hutson. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Johnston.
could we pull item C, please?
Okay, item C, we'll go down to action items. Is there a motion to approve the consent items of item A, B, and D?
So moved.
Councilor Johnston has made the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Gunn. Any discussion on consent items A, B, and D? Seeing no discussion, roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Brings us to action items for item 9. Item C from the consent items has come down and will be the first thing that we take up. And that is Councilor Johnston.
The notice of election is being submitted to the mayor and council to authorize the general and referendum election scheduled for Tuesday, November 2nd, 2021. The clerk is required by Title 21A, Article Section 622/A, has prepared the notice of election, which will be posted in all wards on or before October 26, 2021. Be it ordered that the City Council approve the notice of election for the general and referendum election scheduled for Tuesday, November 2nd, 2021. I move to approve the order.
Motion's been made by Councilor Johnston. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor McPhail. Any discussion? Councilor Johnston?
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to kind of highlight, I mean, I recognize that most individuals know that there's an election, but, you know, we've traditionally had pretty low turnout for these off-year cycles, and so, you know, it's available to vote now, absentee. There's several rather important items out there. There's 9 charter amendments, there's a $50 million bond, and of course, there's elected officials that are up for election. So I just thought it was a good opportunity to let the public know that, you know, it's important and get out and vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. That brings us to a joint meeting with the Long-Range Planning Committee.
Good evening, Mayor Doyle, members of the council. That items A and B are really more consolidated. It's a little bit of a misnomer. There was a joint meeting of the Long Range Planning Committee and the Economic Development Committee prior to this meeting. However, what we do have for you tonight is a comprehensive plan update. And for the record, I'm Jason Garnham, Saco City Planner. And as some of you probably know, approximately a year ago, my predecessors in the planning office began work with planning and design consultants to initiate a complete overhaul of Saco's comprehensive plan. And after doing some initial fact-finding and research, our consultants are back for a push to develop that draft plan for review later this fall. And we have here tonight Phil Chafing from Stantec to provide a presentation on the update and to facilitate a discussion. So I'll give the floor to Phil. Thank you.
Thank you. Phil, before you start, Councilor McPhail or Councilor Archer, whichever one would like, can you read into the item record, action item B? So that everyone knows exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah, I'll take it, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Archer.
Saco Comprehensive Plan establishes the basis for making strategic city policy, project, and budget decisions by articulating a vision for the future and outlining the goals, objectives, and strategies to achieve it. It also provides the rationale and legal support for zoning, impact fees, and other regulations that guide or restrict development in the community. To remain relevant and reflect the ever-changing conditions of the community, the comprehensive plan must be periodically via collection and analysis of new data and input from community members and stakeholders. Maine Growth Management Act also requires the plan to be updated and reviewed for consistency with the state requirements at least every 12 years. Saco Planning and Economic Development Department staff and consultants from Stantec, a design firm with the wide-ranging experiences helping communities plan for their futures through comprehensive planning projects and other efforts, began preparing Saco's new comprehensive plan in the fall of 2020. Stakeholder interviews, public meetings, online surveys, and long-range planning committee meetings have been conducted since to inform the effort. City and Stantec staff continue to work on the plan with the goal of adoption of a final plan by City Council during spring 2022. Stantec staff will present an overview of the process so far and discuss major themes and emerging big ideas with City Council during the meeting.
Thank you, Councilor Archer, and that's page 15 in your packet, folks. Phil, please.
Good evening, councilors. Good evening, Mayor. My name is Phil Chafing. I am an associate with Stantec, senior urban designer and planner, and the project manager for the Stantec team for this comprehensive planning process. And Marshall, thank you for that introduction. We have been working with the city since about a year ago on this process, and we wanted to come to council to provide an update on kind of where we have been and where we're headed, and look forward to hearing any questions or comments from councilors as we move through this process. So Marshall actually stole a bit of my thunder here at the beginning in terms of what the comprehensive plan is. It is, I think, a couple of things. It's an opportunity for the city to plan together as a community to think about the future, specifically over the next 10 to 15 years, looking at long-range trends since the last comprehensive plan was adopted in 2011, as well as looking to the future. And then also an opportunity to provide guidance for public and private decision-making. This plan is really meant to be a tool and a policy document for City Council and the Planning Board to use as you are evaluating individual decisions over the course of the next 5, 10, 15 years. A tool for city staff to use as they are putting together budget proposals. It's really meant to be a working document to help keep the big picture in mind as the city evaluates individual decisions. So as we heard, the State Growth Management Act does set out a series of requirements that you see here, the vision statement, a public participation process, regional coordination kind of information on how that would happen with the city, plan implementation, and then very importantly, evaluation measures. How do we measure the progress towards achieving our goal as we carry this out over 12 years? There's a variety of topics that the state requires that you see on this list. We have been collecting data under each of these topics, as well as developing some initial policy recommendations. In the most recent comprehensive plan update that the city undertook in 2018, the city added 2 additional topics on sea level rise and arts and culture. And in this effort, we're also adding a general topic and a focus on sustainability and resiliency as sort of an overall framework to look at the different pieces and the different topic areas that the state requires and how they all fit together. The plan, kind of the meat of the plan that will be the working document for council and planning board and city staff to use and refer to often is going to be the structure of big picture goals, citywide policies, and then specific strategies on how to implement those policies. And as an example, one policy might be implemented one way in the downtown, but look differently in the coastal neighborhoods or in West Saco or along the Portland Road corridor. And so we want to account for that and provide some additional guidance as the city is working to implement this. And I think it's really important to talk about how the comprehensive plan will be used. This planning process is not an end. It's really kind of the beginning of the life of the document here. And as I mentioned at the beginning, it is a guidance for public decision-making, and really the way it does that is to help connect specific decisions to broader policies, so that as an individual budget proposal or an application is under consideration, we can take a step back and look at the bigger picture, so that we can keep that vision in mind and make sure that we're, on an incremental day-to-day basis, making progress towards that vision and those goals. And one important way of doing that is to link the budgeting process to comprehensive plan goals. Ultimately, these goals need to be carried out, and to do that, that requires a certain, financial investment, and whether it's an additional follow-up study or a plan or a capital investment or staffing to be able to make progress towards something. And so tying those budget requests to comprehensive plan goals is one way that can help implement this and carry it out over time. And then finally, using the plan as a way to kind of track that progress over time. The Long-Range Planning Committee that we have been meeting with since January, their first kind of task is helping us through the planning process. But then after this plan is complete, that LRPC lives on as an implementation committee to help track that progress over time. So that, in 5 years, we can look back and say we have made great progress on 7 of our goals, we've made okay progress on a couple, and here's what we're going to do differently to change that. And so that, I think, is a really important part of how this plan can be used as a really active document. Any questions or comments from council on this initial part here? All right. So I wanted to talk next a little bit about where we've been so far. The process that we're working through started off with a visioning process back in early January, going through a planning process, starting to develop our list of goals and policies, and then the action strategy, which is really developing how we're going to carry this plan forward in the future. And from a calendar perspective, as I mentioned, we first got started about a year ago collecting existing conditions information, trends analysis. We began our community visioning in January with a public meeting. In the spring, we went through a series of topic-based meetings where we invited a number of local experts and panelists to talk with us on a couple of particular topics. Over the summer, we've been developing the draft plan and our initial recommendations of goals, policies, and strategies. And we're in the process right now of working with city staff and different departments to review those, to get their input, to make revisions, as well as with the LRPC as well. We're really looking for that input. And our next step is going to be to take that to the public and to put that out there and to hear from the residents to make sure that we have heard them correctly when we were talking with them in the winter and spring earlier this year, and to make those changes to bring them into the plan. And specifically on the topic of community engagement, because that's a really important part of that, is trying to reach as many people, share what we're working on, invite feedback to this. The city has a webpage specifically dedicated to the comprehensive plan. We also have an interactive website that's linked from that city webpage that we have used for surveys and mapping exercises. We'll be posting draft documents up there for review as well. We've been providing frequent updates in the monthly city newsletter. We have shared meeting information through Saco schools to get to reach parents and families that way. So we've really been trying to reach out to people. We are always open and welcome to other ways to reach more residents, to make sure that we really can hear from as many people as we can in the process. In terms of how we've been engaging people along the way, we started off with a series of interviews with city staff, board and committee members, local developers, to kind of get a sense of where the city is today, where we want to be in the future. In January, we had our public kickoff meeting, which, because of the public health conditions at the time, was a virtual forum. We then had a online survey and an interactive mapping exercise that got some good input from residents, which was really exciting. In the spring, we had 4 different topic meetings on downtown, housing, mobility, kind of how we move around the city, and sustainability and resilience. Over those 4 meetings, we had 11 different kind of invited guests from in and around Saco to share their experience and their sort of best practices and thoughts for Saco. We had an interactive piece to each of those meetings where participants could talk to each other in virtual small groups, which was great. And then we had an online ideas forum as well. So that's what we've been doing so far. And our website, the Social Pinpoint kind of interactive website, has been visited by over 1,100 unique visitors, and a number of them have been multiple times. So, we are reaching a good portion of the residents. We always want to hear more. And so again, we welcome any ideas of how we can drive people to the website, to the city webpage to hear more ideas, and particularly with this draft plan, to get feedback on that as well. So just quickly, as kind of an example of things we've been hearing and some of the input we've been gathering, this is that interactive mapping exercise that we invited people to participate in the spring. You were able to take a look at the map, drop a pin, and leave a comment about places you loved, places you wanted to see improved, or ideas you had. People could review those and give them a thumbs up or a thumbs down as a way to kind of get a sense of what are some of the popular ideas there. You see the breakdown in the pie chart. Some of the most frequent kind of themes we were hearing was about bicycle and pedestrian connections in downtown and the coastal neighborhoods in particular. People really connecting with the coast and the beaches and the river as an important part of the identity, traffic and parking, and taking advantage of the parks and trails that are here. So some really helpful feedback that way. And we also then had a survey that asked a number of questions, and these are just a couple examples of some of the feedback we got. And here you see that when we asked about what people love about the city, it was the sense of community, either the beach or the Saco River, the green spaces here, downtown, and several others. And that all fed into the vision and the guiding principles that we developed together with the LRPC. We also asked people to give us a sense of all the different topics that the comprehensive plan has to cover, what are the ones that you are, most important to you? And we heard land use, fiscal capacity, this is the city's kind of financial conditions, transportation, economic development, sustainability, and resilience as ones that a number of people felt were very important. And so those are, we're focusing on all of the topics, but aware that, some of these are of particular interest and importance to residents. So this is, I think, really important, the vision and principles. So we had our public kickoff forum in January. We had the online survey and the map to get additional feedback. And from that, from our stakeholder conversations, from meetings with the LRPC, we developed a vision and a set of guiding principles. And these are really kind of the foundation of the plan, and I think just a very important part of this. And so this is the one slide that I will read the words of, in part because it came from our community feedback, in part because we worked with the Long-Range Planning Committee to really try to get this right, and in part because this really is the overarching structure that the different parts of the plan are trying to help accomplish. And so this vision statement reads, Saco, a community for a lifetime. Saco is known as a welcoming, small city committed to managing its growth to build a better community for all and for a lifetime. As we grow, we continue to preserve our rich historic and natural legacy while celebrating our defining assets, a vibrant downtown, cherished beaches, the Saco River, and natural open spaces. And so this is the vision for the comp plan, and I think a really important foundational element. And that's then supported by 9 guiding principles. These, I won't read through them all, but they cover the topics that the state requires the city to address, but it tries to do it in a more integrated fashion. You can't think of transportation in a silo by itself. You can't think of housing all by itself. And so throughout this plan, we're trying to demonstrate those interconnections, how a decision about transportation affects economic development or housing or environmental stewardship. These are all tied together in some ways, and that's a common theme we're trying to convey through the plan. And these 9 guiding principles then have become our 9 goals that we are using to organize the policies and the strategies. And that, again, is really kind of the heart of this plan and what the council and planning board and city staff and others will be using over the life of this to carry the plan forward. And so I think these are 2 really important kind of foundational elements to the comprehensive plan. We published this online. There's a link there on the bottom to the vision and principles that are available both on the city website as well as that interactive webpage. And so if you haven't had a chance to take a look at that, I really would encourage you to share that around as well, because I think that, again, is just a very foundational part of this comprehensive plan. So are there any initial questions or comments on kind of the vision and the principles and how we've gotten to where we are today?
Councilor Berman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I love the document as I saw it in the packet. It was exciting, which is maybe strange to get excited by a comprehensive plan.
That's great.
Yeah, I thought it was really nice. I did have maybe two pieces of feedback or questions. And I noticed on the data you provided that beaches and rivers were some of the forefront of the things people found special about Saco and kind of focused on and commented on. And while they're integrated throughout the plan, I'm wondering if there isn't a better way to highlight that. And then part of what I'm noticing as I think about Saco and where it's going is that we have a relatively underutilized river and coastline compared to our neighbors and other communities in Maine. I think I could count on maybe one finger the number of businesses that provide a water view and eating or dining or drinking. Maybe similarly, on one hand, maybe on one finger, the number of businesses that enhance access to the water. If you wanted boating supplies, you wouldn't buy them in Maine. If you wanted beach supplies, they're hard to find near the coast. If you wanted to get access to the water, it's relatively challenging. And I think that's a real unique area for development and growth that capitalizes on the things that make Saco special. And so I'm wondering if either as an additional guiding principle or in places where you define targeted economic development towards our strengths, if things like the coast and river don't deserve a special shout out, both in terms of preservation, but also in terms of economic development and providing access to our community.
Mm-hmm. And that's an excellent point, and that's actually something that we heard from the community feedback as well. People interested in more access to the river for recreational purposes, more access to the river and programming, events and things happening along the river, especially near downtown, connections between downtown and the coastal neighborhoods. So that's something that we heard as well in kind of the general community feedback. And we do, we have recommended several policies, particularly under economic opportunity, health and well-being, resilience, I believe, as well, and a couple others that do specifically address, taking advantage of that as a resource to both steward it and protect it, but to allow people to use it more. Because I think the more people appreciate and use the river, the more they'll want to protect it and sustain it for future generations. And so I think that's an excellent point and very well taken. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And then my second piece is, I noticed you talk about expanding housing options for everyone to meet the needs of all Saco residents, and I think that's really great. I also note that the Maine population demographics are changing. For example, we've been provided the April 2021 Office State Economist population projections, through 2028, or Saco had a similar one for economic development that we got in December 2020, suggesting really that we were expecting an aging population, and it's just really going to shift older over the next 10 years. And if you've taken that into account as you've made some of these suggestions and thought about our long-term vision.
Yes, absolutely. And we saw a lot of that same information. The demographics are definitely aging. Together with that, a trend towards fewer kids in households as well. And so those are two trends that are impacting not just Saco and Maine, but large parts of the country in terms of larger demographic things. So under housing options, we are thinking of ways to encourage more housing that is near transit. So if you choose not to drive or you can't drive, you can still get around, or you can walk to the store or the doctor's appointments. Thinking about opportunities for people to age in place in their existing homes. So are there ways, particularly in older communities like Saco, where you have a large housing stock that has been built 50, 75, 100 plus years ago, improvements to allow people to stay in those spaces longer, whether those are physical improvements, looking to even smart home technology can be used to help people age in place. And then also the social supports for that as well. So thinking under health and well-being, the recreation opportunities, the social opportunities, and then how that ties to the city's fiscal position. As homeowners age, they transition to a fixed income, their ability to support additional property tax increases is more limited. And so that points to a need to increase the city's commercial tax base, think about ways to diversify that. And so there's several different ways that those aging demographics kind of fall into these different categories. And that absolutely is something that we're focused on, because in the long term, those changes will just keep happening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Please continue, Phil.
So I'll cover this information fairly briefly here. This is just a little bit of kind of some of the bigger trends, that relate to demographics and the economy, and also just a quick little recap of some of the key findings from our analysis of where Saco is today and where it's headed as you look at trends. Obviously, we are developing a plan in a very unique moment in time in the pandemic here. The last 2 years has taught us a lot of things. It exposed a lot of new, it's accelerated some trends. It has changed the course of others. So there are a number of things that have changed. People are really interested in getting out into nature and into the trails. And we've heard, talking with city staff and other organizations, a big increase in the number of people who are using the trails here in Saco today, discovering places they didn't know existed before. A lot of places looking to adapt streets for outdoor dining, and Saco and a lot of the restaurants in Main Street have done that over the course of the last 2 years. As well as remote work, that again is not a trend that started with the pandemic, but has been accelerated. And the question now really is how does that shake out in the long run? To what extent do companies go fully back into the office, do some hybrid of in-person and remote work, and the impacts that has on economic development. And it's also accelerated a lot of the challenges that we're facing retailers and small businesses. In talking with representatives at Saco Main Street, downtown actually saw a couple businesses open up during the pandemic, which is great, and I think talks to the confidence that small business owners have in Saco as a place to do business, and that is exciting, and we want to find ways to support and kind of amplify that. There are other things that the pandemic hasn't necessarily changed, and a lot of those are bigger trends around the demographics, those aging population. That has not changed because of the pandemic. The economic and mobility trends that are favoring communities that have a downtown that offers a sense of place and ability to walk around, a place to get a bite to eat, see some interesting art from a local artist, meet your friends. Those are places that are increasingly attracting people, whether that are aging baby boomers who don't want to take care of a big house anymore, whether it's young people who are beginning their careers and looking to get started somewhere. And so those are all important things that we're looking to kind of build on in the process here. There's also the economic side of things. As we look, these are national trends here, but an increasing number of jobs that require some level of higher education, even within fields like manufacturing or production. An increasing number of those require some amount of higher education with the technology and everything else. And what that does is it creates kind of this demand for knowledge workers or people with that higher education level. And so that has economic impacts, as well as that kind of medium skill worker level. And how do you retrain them and give them the tools to advance or to switch to a different career or industry? There's the demographic opportunity that we talked about in terms of the aging population, shrinking household size, fewer and fewer, traditional kind of two parents with children. All of that is starting to change, and that changes our housing preferences, economics, and what we're looking for in terms of recreation, and how that matches up with our existing housing stock. These are national figures here, but Saco is not so different in terms of the mix of single-family detached houses to other types of houses. And so we're thinking about ways to encourage additional housing types that can help support, whether it's the aging baby boomers, the empty nesters, singles, couples, people getting started, greater variety that provides more options for people. Looking to the future, as well, there's also changes in how we move around. Coming sooner are things like electric vehicles and getting around on bicycles and scooters. And in the long run, how does changing car technology and even the way we buy cars affect, places like the Route 1 corridor and traditional car dealerships? So factoring, some of these larger trends into our thinking. And then finally, the impacts of a changing climate as we look at the shoreline, not just Camp Ellis, but all of the coastal neighborhoods. What do those look like as storms become stronger and happen more frequently? and then just general kind of imperatives to mitigate and adapt to climate change. So these are some of the bigger picture trends that are impacting not just Saco, but a lot of all communities, really, and that are an important part of our thinking as we develop these policies. So I'll move through this last section here just quickly, but one of the things as we've gotten to know the city here is that it has a little bit of something for everyone. It has your main street downtown, and it has rural areas. It has the beach and the coastal neighborhoods, and it has a variety of different types of in-town neighborhoods that all have something to offer. It has open spaces, different ways to move around, historic character, number of jobs here. So there's a lot that Saco has to build on. And that's what this comprehensive plan is looking to do, is to take these strengths and these assets, to reinforce them, and to use the growth that is coming to really shape and reinforce the type of place that Saco wants to be. So just some key takeaways. We already heard a little bit that the population is both growing, but it's also getting older. We know that rising housing costs are a real issue and a real burden for a lot of residents, as well as people who are looking to move here. That ties a little bit into economic development and attracting more diverse jobs to build resiliency, and also more higher paying jobs. Looking at transportation and how regional patterns influence getting around the city here today. Protecting, preserving, enhancing our natural resources, not just the river and the beach, but also our open spaces and our farmland and our forests, thinking about the development pressures on those. And then again, adapting to a changing environment. And I just mention here the link at the bottom. There's a two-pager that's also been available online, both on the city webpage and the interactive website, that has just a quick kind of summary of this information. It's a great resource as well. The next set, I'm just going to focus here on headlines. This is just a quick snapshot in terms of population, household, and housing growth trends from 2000 to 2010 to 2020. And then looking forward, the city has been growing and will continue to grow. And so we can harness this growth opportunity to help strengthen and reinforce the things that we love about the city, and make sure that we're heading in that direction. And that's where that long-range perspective and these vision and goals are important to keep in mind as we go through individual decisions on a day-to-day basis. And sustainability and resiliency is kind of an overall lens to this. It's not just the environmental piece, but it's how we live, it's how we move around, it is where we work, the type of job that we have, the type of house that we live in, our own health and well-being and our lifestyle, whether it's an active one or more sedentary because of the physical setting in which we live. And so that impacts a lot of things, and I think is a helpful kind of way to think about the policies and strategies within the plan. So as I mentioned, the population is increasing. The graph on the right there is from the Maine State Economist that shows growth out to 2038. And that's the opportunity to kind of harness that to attract the types of jobs and the type of, build out the type of public and shared spaces that we all want to use and to appreciate. As I mentioned, the trends for fewer kids and larger share of people ages 65 and over is a trend that we see continuing in the future. From an economic development standpoint, job growth is positive. It's higher than the state, but it is lower than a number of Saco's neighbors. And as you see here, these are some neighboring communities. And you see Saco's actually kind of unique in this group almost, and that the rate of population growth has been higher than job growth. And so again, this is an opportunity to start to find ways to attract more jobs to complement that so that more people who live here can also work here as well. We know that housing costs have been rising as we look back through trends in building permits. Single-family housing still outpaces multifamily on a year-to-year basis. But that has impacts in terms of where that growth is happening, the cost of that housing. And so there are, as we think about our policies, thinking about how we can continue to offer more options for people. And some of that is related to the burden of housing costs on people who are making the median income here. And that, we know is an issue, not just in Saco, but throughout the region, and something that the city can take some steps towards, but is also, again, going to those regional partnerships to work together with neighboring communities. This is looking at property tax values, seeing that a lot of the most valuable on kind of a per square foot basis land is in downtown and along the coastal neighborhoods. As you get further out, the land value goes down. It's a connection to public infrastructure, and again, kind of where we grow to build value for the city. And also related to the cost of both housing and transportation. In a lot of households, transportation can be as big or an even bigger share of a household's income. And so where that house is located is a very important factor as well, not just how many square feet it has or what the yard looks like, but also where it's located. And this factors in as we look at a statewide level from going back to the sustainability and resiliency lens, that transportation and the residential sector are the two largest contributors to greenhouse gas emissions. So as the city thinks about sustainable growth, thinking about the transportation patterns and transportation systems, and the residential, the housing that's here, this can factor into that. And then that is, I thought I had one more slide, but that's all right. So that's kind of the snapshot in terms of the existing trends, what we've found, and what's really influencing our planning recommendations. So just to close and kind of where we're headed from here, we're developing our draft plan document. An important part of that's going to be the future land use plan, identifying growth areas where we want to concentrate the public infrastructure investments, and also to encourage through our regulations and our policies, private development to happen. We are looking forward to hosting a public open house in November. We'll be finalizing a date and location for that soon and getting the word out. And so again, if there are recommendations on how we can make sure we're reaching as many people as we can, we definitely want to hear that. We'll have the online component to that as well. And then looking to revise that plan based on input and move towards public hearings in the spring of next year. So that's kind of where we've been, how we've gotten to where we're at today and where we're headed. I thank you very much for your time. If there are any questions or comments, I'm happy to take those.
Thank you. Any questions? Councilor Johnston, then Councilor McPhail. Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. I guess my first question, you actually already answered with the slides up there as far as public engagement upcoming. But the question I have has to do with, in your experience with other similar sized communities, and obviously we have a pandemic that's been raging, but what level of participation do you think Saco has had in comparison? Like, are we on par, are we below, or above?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. I would say it is a little hard to tell with a pandemic because that does influence things. We've worked in other communities where the online component has gotten a much larger turnout, and other communities where it hasn't. I think we had a really strong participation in the early visioning phase. I think the topic phase, we struggled a little bit to reach as many people as we would have liked to. And so that's why I think this opportunity with the public open house is a really important one to make sure we really are getting the word out there and getting as many people in person if possible. And if they're not comfortable or unable to make it, to make sure that we are providing some substantial opportunities online as well. And I think to the question of kind of comparison, I would say it's probably on par. Comprehensive plans can often be a little hard for people to kind of connect with in the same way as a neighborhood plan or something that's a little bit more specific. But I think the visioning piece, those guiding principles that sort of set the stage for all of that, that the input that we got in that phase was very informative to us and echoed what we had seen in the Bridge 2025 process from earlier as well. That was one of the things that we kind of used as an initial kind of information gathering. And so it was really great to see that kind of continuity, I think. So we're looking forward to hearing from more people in this next phase. We've really appreciated the input that we've had so far, and just, like I said, looking forward to reaching more people, particularly with this open house.
Thank you.
Councilor McPhail.
Thank you. I just want to thank Phil and his associate David as a member of the LRPC for the past year. It's been an amazing experience so far. Thanks to the residents who have come out, and Councilor Johnston, we've also had the first couple of Saco Main Street events. Former planner Hamlin had booth setups, and we had residents coming and actually speaking outside of the website interaction, but just trying to get personal knowledge, one-on-one kind of thing. Really good responses from that as well. So again, I just want to thank you and David for the past year. Looking forward to keeping it going and wrapping it up and going forward with it. It's been a lot of really good information and a lot of eye-opening experiences to see where we compare with other communities in our own area and across the nation. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Phil, thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you very much for your time tonight. I appreciate it, and if you do have any additional questions or comments, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to what was item C, now item D. It's one reading adoption of an employee handbook, page 24 in your packet. Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. We have updated our employee handbook to encompass policies from the non-union personnel policy and align policies citywide, which was also a focus during union negotiations. The proposed document will replace the existing non-union personnel policy and employee handbook to minimize confusion and enhance communication and clarity for our employees. Furthermore, we revised our existing policies for compliance and best practices and introduced new policies to accomplish the same purpose. Both our human resource consultant and labor attorney reviewed the handbook. Once the council adopts the handbook, we will educate existing employees about the changes and review the new manual during orientation and onboarding for our new employees. Staff supports the adoption of the proposed employee handbook. Be it ordered that the City Council repeal the existing employee handbook and non-union personnel policy and adopt the City of Saco Employee Handbook 2021. I move to approve the order.
Motion's been made by Councilor Johnston. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Hatch. Any discussion on the adoption of the employee handbook? Councilor Archer?
Just a recommendation for future. I'm good with this, but when there are changes, if they could be in red. So we got the document and we can see it, but it was hard to identify where changes are. So other than that, also.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Oh, okay, thank you. I'll bring up,
We do have a presentation from staff just to go over the changes also.
Interim Human Resource Director Emily Roy. Welcome.
Thank you. So I didn't prepare a formal presentation, but I did want to walk you through a high-level summary of some of the changes. So the only reason we didn't give you a red line version is because every policy was reviewed and updated in some way, so it would be unreadable. So I'll just quickly run through some changes so that you have that context. So first, I'd like to say thank you to our department heads, finance director, the city administrator, payroll specialist, and our HR consultant for their help with this handbook. It was quite the extensive overhaul, and we had several overarching goals during the review of the handbook. These goals were, by repealing the existing employee handbook and non-union personnel policies, we've eliminated the confusion between the two documents. And if employee is covered under a collective bargaining agreement and there are competing policies, then their union contract supersedes the employee handbook. Otherwise, all employees are expected to abide by the policies in the document. However, we did align policies across the union contracts where possible, and you'll continue to see those as we move those forward. Our second goal was to update existing policies for compliance and best practices, as was shared in the item commentary, and include new policies for the same purpose. We reorganized the policies to enhance the document navigation and try to group policies together in a more easy to understand way. And lastly, we had the employee handbook thoroughly vetted by both our human resources consultant and our labor legal partners at Bernstein Sure. So I'm going to walk through this summary, but as I already stated, every policy was reviewed, so we're not going to get into the details of specific changes, but you can ask any questions that you have during this process. In Section 1, if you review the handbook, we help orient the employee to the organization and form of government, the council vision statement, and the employee components of the Code of Ethics and Conduct. So again, that carries that document through to both elected officials, volunteers, and to our employees. So there's some continuity there. We updated the EOE statement and added a commitment to diversity statement in Section 2. For compliance purposes, we also included immigration law, ADA, reasonable accommodation, harassment, unlawful discrimination, whistleblower, and religion accommodation policies. Additionally, we added the non-bullying policy because while it's not technically illegal to bully, It's important to clearly communicate expectations and define bullying to ensure a safe working environment for our employees and prevent bullying in the workplace. In Section 3, we included policies related to employment relationship. This includes our recruiting practices, employee and FLSA classifications, hiring and probation guidelines, performance evaluations, personnel file management, and the separation process. We reviewed this section extensively with our legal partners. In Section 4, we have the fewest policies. These are just related to discipline and dispute resolution. In Section 5, we focus on workplace health and safety. So something to note, you'll not see pandemic response nor vaccination policy in this section. So OSHA just sent the emergency technical standards to the White House last week, so guidance is forthcoming. And additionally, the pandemic guidelines have evolved so rapidly and vary case by case, so we're currently adhering to CDC guidance for our response, but did not include it in this document. In Section 6, workplace guidelines are described in the related policies. These were all existing policies, which required some refinement and updates, including cell phone usage and city vehicles. In Section 7, you'll find our policies related to wage classification, hours of work, overtime, separation pay, and emergency closures. In Section 8, you'll find all of the holidays our non-union employees observe, including the newly added Juneteenth. In Section 9, you'll find employee leave, including both paid and unpaid time off. We worked extensively on this section. The finance director and I tried to review all of the leave practices to make sure that we were being consistent. This would enhance our payroll process. These policies also required some updates and refinements for compliance, and we updated the bereavement leave policy to be more inclusive of family structures and added a vacation buyback program. So this is a perk for employees where they can buy out some of their vacation time, but it also helps us reduce liability for costly separations. And additionally, we've created a parental leave policy to accompany the council allocated funds for this purpose. And we removed the attendance incentive that encouraged employees to come to work sick and replaced those with 2 personal days to be used at the employee's discretion. In Section 10, health benefits, we clarified some language for the existing policies and added a modified duty policy to ensure we're returning employees back to work safely and timely. We created Section 11 to document retirement benefits separately from the health benefits to enhance navigation of the document. And then in the appendices, we added Appendix A to include copies of separately adopted council policies, and then the other appendices for complete policies for those that are referenced throughout the document. And lastly, there's an acknowledgement form that each employee will sign. So as part of the rollout, we'll get signatures from existing employees and have question and answer sessions as part of the rollout in November. And we'll be adding this document to the hiring module and paychecks and collect e-signatures during the onboarding process. Any questions?
Council, any questions on the document that Director Roy has put forward and given a presentation on? Councilor Hatch.
I'd just like to compliment you on, it's a very well-done document, very thorough. I know it was a lot of work, a lot of pulling stuff together. I think it's going to serve us very well moving forward, so whoever was involved in that effort, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. Yeah, along the same lines. Councilor Hatch, I did have some familiarity with the prior policies, and I always found a lot of inconsistencies in them. And so I imagine this was a big undertaking. And so thank you to yourself and everybody else that was involved in it.
Thank you.
Councilor Archer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Hearn. Obviously, ditto to everyone that's said, but as you always know, we all make minor mistakes. So if the council's not against this, considering this a editorial change rather than an amendment, it says that the mayor serves 2-year terms. That's not correct?
Yep.
Can we consider this an editorial, not an official amendment, and it's just to change it to 3, we call it good?
I don't hear any objection.
All right.
I tried to unilaterally change your term. I apologize.
That's okay. People are always telling me what to do anyway.
That is the power of the pen.
Any further discussion on this change? Okay, roll call vote. Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Counselor Purdy?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Berman?
Yes.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor McPhail?
Yes.
Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to adopt the new employee handbook. Brings us to a final reading, Chapter 81, Conveyance of City Property, 509 Buxton Road, page 94 in your packet. Counselor Purdy.
Thank you. A city-owned property at the corner of Buxton and Grant Roads is proposed to be sold. The property was foreclosed on by the city for the non-payment of taxes in January 2018. The Finance Department reports several attempts to communicate with the owner, a Russell Haller, with no response. The current assessment for the 16-acre parcel values the land at $153,800 and a building on the site at $39,500. The parcel has not been inspected for development potential. This item was reviewed by the Planning Board at its April 20 meeting. The board recommended that the Department of Public Works be consulted as to the advisability of retaining additional right-of-way along both Grant and Buxton roads, and that the remainder of the parcel be considered for sale by the city. The council discussed this item under new business during the June 7 meeting and requested input from the Conservation Commission, who also recommends the city to move forward with selling the property. I move to authorize the city administrator to sell 509 Buxton Road.
Motion's been made by Counselor Purdy. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor McPhail. Any discussion? Counselor Johnston?
Thank you. So, I mean, I can only speak for myself, but I don't generally take taking of property lightly, and I understand that, you know, this individual, this family didn't pay their taxes, but it's always kind of a hard decision to make. But I think at this point, the city's done what they could, you know, to get, I mean, clearly either the property owner is deceased, the family members forgot that it was in ownership. So, I mean, here we are with that decision. But I do still kind of sit here uncomfortable with the motion, whereas we're just straight up authorizing the administrator to sell this property. Code requires that the city council set the method of sale, and I brought this up on actually the next item on the agenda. We never set that method of sale. We haven't really discussed the method of sale, so I'm curious at this point, is there a preferred method of sale from staff? Have we approached any real estate agents about what the value may be on the market? And I think previously, either myself or another counselor asked if we have any idea of how many buildable lots are on this property. I understand it's about 16 acres, some of which is wet, but I think all those are pertinent to the decision to sell it. So if staff has an answer to that, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you. City Administrator Ken Rather, is there any active offer on this property? Is there anyone knocking down the door to buy this property?
There is not, and the city planner or economic development director can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know of any active interests or offers. Obviously, usually we sell property either via an RFP process or with a broker, so I think those are kind of the two main options. Denise or Jason, if you want to weigh in, happy to hear from you also. But the council can obviously decide how they'd like to dispose of the property and give staff that direction if they'd like.
Is there a recommended, staff recommended way to sell this property, as Councilor Johnston asked?
This property has been pretty much on the conversation table since I arrived a little over 3 years ago, and I think Glennis can attest to that. It was asked by finance to help have economic development and planning help in disposing the property that had been on the records for how many years before that, Glennis?
2017.
So exactly, so all we were doing is trying to follow the Chapter 81 process and get it to this point. Is there a staff recommendation at this point as to how we're going to dispose of that? I think like the other properties that we have done an RFP, and willing to do that, or whatever the council wishes us to do. But the RFP has served a successful process, and we start with that, and if that process doesn't succeed, then we would put it in the commercial market or residential market. Does that help?
Thank you. Any further questions?
Just
Councilor Johnston?
Not a question, just a comment. I mean, from my standpoint, and I said this previously, if it would make sense that we maximize the value in this property. I believe, I don't remember if it was this current budget or the previous budget, but I believe we budgeted for the sale of this. My experience with RFPs is it's a very limited amount of people. You'll probably get some sly developer that realizes it's out there and snatch it up. I much rather put it on the market and see what we get. That's my, personal preference. I don't know about the rest of council, but I also don't have any idea of what the value is. So I'm kind of inclined to perhaps approach a realtor and find out what type of value they see in it before we set the sale. So that's my thought.
City Administrator Kenrath, do we have what a value on this parcel would be?
No, we have an assessed value, obviously, but I don't believe we've had a market assessment done by, a broker or a real estate agent.
Thank you. Any further? Councilor Hatch?
I would agree that we should make some effort to determine what the fair market value is, and I believe we've done that before through the use of some broker opinions, so I would highly suggest that that be a step we take before we move too fast on this. To Councilor Johnston's point, I don't want to be giving this away.
Any further comments?
I'm just going to
Discussion? Councilor Johnston?
Just going to add, we've repossessed this for around $10,000. So I certainly don't want to give it away. If we're going to give it away, I just assume give it back to the family that owned it. But I personally feel we have a financial obligation, given our previous actions, or prior council's previous actions, to, again, sell this for the most money we can get. Thank you.
Council, I think Director Clavette pointed out that, as well as City Administrator Kenrath, you can make an motion here to amend this to sell it however you'd like in accordance with the rules and policies of the city. With that said, barring that, the RFP process, you are the final act in the RFP process. So if City Council, or excuse me, if the city puts out an RFP process and you don't like what's come back, you don't think the value is there in accordance with the property, you don't have to accept it. And then you can put it out to the market process. But remember, when you put it out to a broker process, the broker gets portion of the fees as part of the selling to the outreach. So, just be mindful of that. We can still do both. Again, there's no rush on this. There's no backroom deal. There's nobody waiting. There's no giveaway. All it is, do you want to sell the property as a board, and how do you want to do that? That's where we are. So, Councilor Berman.
Mr. Mayor, I move to amend this motion to authorize the sale of 509 Buxton Road after seeking an opinion on the market value and listing it with a residential or commercial broker.
Second.
Bear with me, I'm writing. Okay, so the motion has been made by Councilor Berman to get a market value on the property and list with a commercial broker. That was seconded by Councilor Johnston. Any discussion? On the amendment, Councilor Gunn.
So am I to understand that if we were to pass this motion, then we would basically just sideline the RFP process in favor of a private broker? Am I following this right?
Yes, if you were to approve this amendment, the then main motion on there would be amended to make this go through the market value process and then through a mortgage broker or commercial broker.
And as a follow-up question to that, Mr. Mayor, if we go through that process, that means that in that situation, the broker obviously would get a fee for their time and effort, regardless of what we do?
If when and if the property sells, they would get a portion of the sales.
Okay, so if we put it out to market value, we couldn't ever revert back to the RFP? It's pretty much just one or the other at this point?
Once you set it to a broker, it's then their job to sell it.
You have to forgive me, I'm not a real estate person. I just want to, for the public's benefit, they understand what we're potentially voting on here.
That's my understanding, is once it goes to the broker, the RFP process is no longer an option if they bring something back and you decide to sell it.
I see.
And if you put it in the motion that you're selling it through a commercial broker, you cannot use the RFP process because you're putting it in the motion that you're going to sell it through a commercial broker.
I see.
Can I answer your question?
Yes, thank you for the information.
Councilor Archer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I see the pros and cons to both of this, but a commercial broker will set the price and it's outside of our hands at that point, correct?
That's my understanding,
come
unless
back
there's
to
an
council.
agreement with the commercial broker. Director Clavette? City Administrator Canrath?
I mean, we have input, obviously, on what we want to list it for. Similar to like when you list your residential house, they give you their opinion of what the market value is, but you don't have to say yes. You could say, well, I want to try for 20,000 more, or I want to move this quickly and go for 20,000 less.
So a
So
sale-
we're not locked into whatever they say.
A sale would come back to the council to confirm.
Well, I also, we would, if we go with a broker, we would sign a listing contract with them. So I was thinking maybe we could, talk to a broker, have a proposed contract with a proposed commission structure, bring that back here for you guys to look at, and if you're good with the price and the commission, then we go forth and sign a contract with them and get it listed.
Okay. All right, so there is a possibility that no one wants this property under a commercial brokerage. So I would like to put an amendment as a secondary, just to lock it down now, that if the commercial broker approach does not work, the city staff can go to the RFP. Is that something that can be done?
But we would be locked into a contract for a period of time, usually
6 months.
6 months with a
Yes.
broker.
The last thing I want to do is sit on this for many years, because we've had properties similar. And the value of the property building, it's probably not worth that, because this is the one that's condemned? No, this isn't.
The value is in the land. I mean, anybody.
The value, exactly.
The
Yeah,
16
it's
acres.
It's buildable lots.
I'm not going to make a amendment.
Director Clavette, did you want to say anything? I called on you, so I don't want to move on without allowing you the opportunity to speak.
Just a point of clarification, once you release this to a broker, it's a confidential listing, it's a confidential purchaser, you have no control over the outcomes of who buys it and what they're going to use it for. So just want you to make sure that you understand the ramifications or the credits, whichever way you want to look at it. It completely makes it an objective process, but it completely takes it out of your hands. Just want you to be aware of that.
Thank you. Any further discussion, Councilor Johnston?
I would agree, but I would just say that given that it's in the conservation zone, it's primarily probably going to be a single-family or a series of single-family homes, maybe, two-family. So given the zoning, I'm not as concerned with that aspect. I think the pro to listing it on the market is it's a much more transparent process for everybody out there. The average person, for example, that was looking to build a home in Saco would have no idea to go to an RFP. They check the real estate listings like the rest of us. So that's my goal here, is to hopefully, have somebody that's looking to move here, build a home here, and acquire this property to do so and put it back on the tax records. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the amendment? On the amendment. All right, on the amendment only to set market rate value and list with a commercial broker. Counselor Archer?
Aye.
Counselor Purdy?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
No.
Counselor Berman?
Yes.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor McPhail?
Yes.
Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes, or the amendment passes 6-1. Back to the main motion as amended. Any further discussion on the main motion as amended? Roll call vote. Counselor Archer?
Aye.
Counselor Purdy?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Berman?
Yes.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor McPhail?
Yes.
Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
Main motion passes 7-0. That brings us to item E, second final reading, Phillips Spring Covenants, page 96 in your packet. Counselor Gunn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On July 26, 2018, the city of Saco purchased approximately 42 acres of land from Sweetser located off Moody Street, Interstate I-95 and Industrial Park, identified as Tax Map 42, Lot 1 for $700,000. A subdivision plan, including the construction of Phillips Spring Road, a parcel for the Public Works facility, and 2 additional vacant parcels, was approved by the Planning Board on July 30th, 2019. A prorated portion of the Phillips Spring Road was funded by the City of Saco's Tax Increment Financing, or TIF, districts for business or industrial park access. City staff will sell these parcels through an RFP process beginning in the next several weeks. In advance of awarding an RFP for the purchase and sale of the Phillips Spring parcels, covenants for the subdivision must be adopted. Staff worked with Attorney Tim Murphy to draft covenants consistent with the existing Millbrook and Spring Hill covenants. On September 13th, 2021, the Economic Development Commission unanimously voted to, quote, recommend the City Council adopt the Phillips Spring covenants as presented, unquote. Staff supports the adoption of the Phillips Spring covenants as proposed. I move to approve the final reading and adopt the proposed Phillips Spring covenants titled Declaration of Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions for the Phillips Spring Business Park.
Motion's been made by Counselor Gunn. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor Berman. Any discussion on the Phillips Spring covenants? Counselor Johnston.
Thank you. So I would say, as I have several weeks now, that, you know, I support covenants overall, but on these particular lots, you know, they're not under covenants. It just seems a bit irresponsible to me, from council level, to place covenants that restrict the use of that land for schools when we're in the middle of a school construction process. We have not determined where the land's going. In the end, if it's not on these lots or around these lots, or make use of these lots, I could see covenants that are restrictive to no schools. But again, right now, it's kind of, I don't know, it seems counterproductive and seem to be going in 2 different directions. Schools going one direction, we should be supporting them, not selling out land from under them or putting covenants that restrict the use. But, you know, I've said that, and clearly council's probably going to move forward with it the way they want. But I think it was last week or the prior week, there were a few edits that I had suggested on page 113 of the packet. There's Article 6, modification repeal, 6.1, modification of the declarant. Under items B and C, I had suggested that we remove the word "or" and put "and city council" to both those items. And the thought process was that with the EDC being more of an advisory role and council as a legislative body, it would make sense to send it to the EDC, let them weigh in with an opinion, and then send it to council for a final vote, whether or not we want to modify or repeal anything from the covenants in the future. So I guess the cleanest way to do that would be to make a motion to amend by inserting, with the edits suggested by Councilor Johnston, at the end of the word "reading" and the ending of the word "and." You understand?
Councilor Justin, you're looking to, on page 113, you are looking to modify 6.1 items B and D. Is that my understanding, by removing the word "or" between Economic Development Commission and City Council? And then in section D, you're looking to,
B and C.
I'm sorry, B and C.
B and
Thank you.
C, replace "or" with "and."
Okay.
And I thought that the easier way to do it would just be to amend the main motion so that it would read, I move to approve the final reading with the edits suggested by Councilor Johnston and adopt the proposed Phillips Springs covenants titled Declaration of Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions for the Phillips Springs Business Park. And then I would just, obviously, the administrator just heard that and staff could make those changes to the actual document.
Okay. Motion's been made by Councilor Johnston to make changes to items 6.1B and 6.1C, removing the word "or" and adding the word "and." And then the last part of that was to, Councilor Johnston?
That was the only changes to the actual covenants.
Thank you. That is the amendment before you. Is there a second to the amendment?
Second.
Councilor Gunn? Any discussion on the amendment? Roll call vote on the amendment. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes. Back to the main motion as amended. Any discussion? Councilor Archer?
Yes, after taking into consideration what Councilor Johnson said about the schools, rather than tying our hands, I think I came up with an edit for section 5.2, prohibited uses K, to insert where it says schools and daycares, specifically write private schools and private daycares. That would then give public the option.
Is that a motion?
That is a motion, yes.
Okay, there's been a motion for an amendment to add the word "private" in between schools and daycares into this document. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Johnston. Any discussion on that? Councilor Berman?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I certainly agree that we are in the process of finding, listing, and cataloging all available property for school construction right now, and thus it does seem somewhat counterintuitive to be creating covenants that would prohibit the building of schools on these lots. I also believe that in general, business and industrial parks are not the best sites for schools. Moreover, we can always modify these covenants in the future if needed to allow schools. We've done so in the past. And I would prefer the schools not end up here. So I will be not supporting this amendment.
Thank you. Director Clavette, could you come forward? The road put in for that, for Phillips Spring Road itself, that was done with TIF monies, is that correct?
That is correct. 1.2 million came out of the TIF program to develop that road, specifically for economic development purposes.
And if there's 3 Phillips Spring parcels out there?
That is correct.
And what are the lot sizes of each of those?
Oh, goodness gracious. I don't remember off the top of my head, but anywhere from 5 to 7 usable acres apiece.
5 to 7 usable acres, so not 20 acres, which has kind of been floated out there about the minimum for a pre-K through 5 school or pre-K through 2 school.
Not likely that it would be accommodated. If any one of the parcels could potentially accommodate that, it would be the clear parcels, which don't have any covenants and will not have any covenants or restrictions, and don't have any TIF dollars expended to get to that point either.
So if there was a thought about a school on the Sweetser property that had some, that maybe had an entrance over on Phillips Spring Road. As part of the bonding process for a new school, we would have to pay back the $1.2 million for the road because it was paid for out of TIF monies?
It has to be used for economic development purposes. If it's used for anything other, you cannot use TIF dollars to pay for that. That said, if you wanted to traverse the economic development-related parcels that were paid for by TIFs at $1.2 million and go to the next parcel, that's not an issue. You can have the schools beyond that, and that parcel is not governed by the covenants.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Johnston.
So, I understand that, but how is it that we built a public works garage that, again, we bought the land based on the need for the DPW garage? It just happened to be excess land that could be divided into whatever council ultimately chooses to do with it. So it seems like there's a little bit discrepancy there as far as what the money can and cannot be used for. Second of all, when it comes to 20 acres of land, I've never said there was adequate land. What I've said repeatedly is that these lots, 2 of them in particular, could be combined with additional land from the Sweetser School to make the 20 acres. And I've never once sat up here and advocated for that location. But the reality is, as a member that sits on this land selection committee, there's very few parcels of land. There's very few parcels of land that are in locations that make sense for the future of the city of Saco. So while I agree with Councilor Berman that the industrial park itself probably is not the best location for children or schools, this is not in the industrial park. The zoning itself is not zoned industrial. It's in a vacant amount of land. So I just think that, again, we're in this process. We already delayed it 5 years. We're looking at another 5 years. Why would we handicap ourselves? I mean, honestly, it's insulting when I talk to people from the school department and they hear this. And here we are, just doing what we want. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Archer.
Yeah, so the reason why I decided to add private is because guess who gets to decide where public properties go, buildings, when you do new construction? It is the council. I do not want private schools there. What I don't want is the travesty that we had to deal with Tuttle Inn. To me, this is about just saying no private, leaving it open to the public, which is us, who would, in future councils, who would make the decision if it's a good fit or not. I'm just trying not to handcuff us and having to go through that Tuttle Inn travesty again. That is all for me. I don't know if it's a good idea. I'm not part of any of those committees. I'm not suggesting. I just don't think we should be handcuffing ourselves.
Thank you.
Again, it prohibits private, not public has option, and that's us, the council.
Thank you. Any further discussion on the amendment only? Again, the amendment is to add private schools, private daycares, and that was made by Councilor Archer, second by Councilor Johnston on this amendment. On the amendment only, roll call vote, Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
No.
Councilor Gunn.
No.
Councilor Berman.
No.
Councilor Hatch.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
No.
Councilor Johnston.
Yes.
Motion fails 3-4. Back to the main motion. Any further discussion on the main motion? On the main motion, roll call vote, Councilor Archer.
Aye.
Councilor Purdy.
Yes.
Councilor Gunn.
Yes.
Councilor Berman.
Yes.
Councilor Hatch.
Yes.
Councilor McPhail.
Yes.
Councilor Johnston.
No.
Motion passes 6-1. That brings us to item F, one reading, Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, page 118 in your packet. Councilor Berman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On August 18th, 2021, the Conservation Commission voted unanimously to recommend the City Council endorse the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, H.R. 2307. This is a bipartisan bill in the U.S. Congress that currently has 70 co-sponsors, including Shelley Pingree, as an original. The bill implements an incremental carbon tax on polluters and spurs innovation to more sustainable changes, while also being revenue neutral by paying a dividend to all American residents, which could total a few $1,000s for a family of 4, for personal investments in clean energy. Currently, this bill is the largest individual piece of legislation that would drop our levels of emission as quickly as possible. The Conservation Commission is asking for the city's endorsement because both of our senators have stated they will endorse this bill nationally if there is enough support from local governments and businesses within the state. From the perspective of Saco, endorsing this does not have direct implications. It simply tells our congressional leadership that Saco is in support of climate action. This vote does not block the city from taking any action in the future. However, it is a concrete step that the city can take in its own effort to be mindful of emissions. Several municipalities across the state have already endorsed the bill, including Portland, South Portland, Freeport, Cape Elizabeth, Brunswick, Harpswell, Aroostook, Vinyl Haven, Bangor, and Farmington. I move to endorse the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act.
Motion's been made by Councilor Berman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Archer. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, roll call vote. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Brings us to item G, one reading and extension of the marijuana moratorium, page 156 in your packet, and that is Councilor McPhail.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Saco City Council voted to enact an emergency ordinance that placed a 61-day moratorium on all new marijuana businesses during the June 28, 2021 meeting. The council then voted to extend the moratorium for 61 additional days on August 23, 2021. The moratorium will thus expire on October 23, 2021, without further council action. Recreational adult use marijuana businesses are prohibited from legally operating in Saco until the city council chooses to opt in via adoption of an ordinance expressly for this purpose. City staff are developing a draft opt-in ordinance for pending review by the Saco Planning Board and City Council. However, Saco's zoning code permits medical marijuana businesses to operate in specific zoning districts. After discussion as a new business item at its September 20th, 2021 meeting, the City Council held a first reading of proposed amendments that would limit those locations to industrial and business industrial zoning districts during the October 4th meeting. These amendments will not take effect until after the current moratorium expires. The emergency ordinance can be extended by council for another 61 days, making it next expiration date December 23rd, 2021. I move to extend the emergency ordinance governing the uses of marijuana within the city by an additional 61 days from the date it expires.
Motion's been made by Councilor McPhail. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Hatch. City Administrator Canrath, do you have any update on this for us?
Yeah, councilors, you saw emails from City Solicitor Tim Murphy today with a slightly revised ordinance for the extension. He did also provide an itemized list of what those minor changes were and explanations to that. So you should have received that in your email this afternoon. And the timing was such, Tim had just sent that. As soon as I got it, I forwarded it to you. So I understand that the late hour, but that is the hour that it was received from the city solicitor with some recommended changes that he thought were important in light of the current situation.
And City Administrator Canrath, do you recommend we read those into the record?
I suppose it would involve rereading the whole document.
Councilor McPhail, can you read the emergency ordinance as prepared by City Solicitor Tim Murphy into the record?
Mr. Mayor, just one clarification. The ordinance we're using is the one that Tim had attached to the email I sent out with yellow highlights on it. That is the correct version with his edits that we're going to be passing.
Which one, the first one or the second one? I've got emergency ordinance number 2.
Yeah, it should be the first document attached, and it's the yellow highlighted version with the changes.
The one with the yellow edits?
Yeah, so I guess alternatively, you could also, Tim lays out exactly what the changes are in the other explanation page. We could also read that into the record, too.
Okay, the emergency ordinance. Whereas the City Council enacted a new zoning ordinance on January 11th, 2021, and whereas that ordinance did not address the best long-term placement of marijuana-related businesses and other marijuana uses within the city because the council did not want to delay enactment and passage of the new zoning ordinance, and whereas legal counsel has advised that a court may or may not enforce the terms of the city's zoning ordinance as to marijuana due to the enactment of 22 MRS Section 2429-D, Maine's so-called opt-in statute, and whereas the City Council enacted Chapter 168 of the City Code in 2017 for the purpose of regulating the use, sale, cultivation, and distribution of recreational marijuana, as well as the operation of marijuana establishments and social clubs. And whereas Section 168 has expired by force of its own terms, see Section 168-8, without the city having taken additional legislative steps to enact new regulations governing marijuana uses, and whereas these events make it unclear how, when, and where the city desires to allow for and/or regulate marijuana uses within the city of Saco, and whereas the sitting of marijuana uses within the community is a critical matter to the community, and whereas these events leave Saco without adequate and clearly defined regulating and zoning ordinances in place which constitutes an emergency situation. Now therefore, the city enacted the following emergency ordinance pursuant to Chapter 2, Section 2.10 of the City Charter. 1. Findings. The City Council finds that its zoning ordinance does not adequately and appropriately define those zones of the city where marijuana uses are best cited, and that such condition, if allowed to continue, would be adverse to the community and to potential abutting properties. It further finds that this emergency condition is made more severe by the expiration of City Code Section 168, leaving marijuana uses largely unregulated throughout the city. 2. Additional findings as to opt-in. The City Council is aware that the state of Maine regulates marijuana pursuant to Title 22, Section 2421, et seq., but that municipalities may also opt to regulate marijuana at the local level pursuant to 22 MRS Section 2429-D. The city has not yet decided whether to opt in, and this leaves new marijuana uses unregulated at the local level, which is detrimental to the city. The absence of local regulation and the potential confusion caused by 22 MRS Section 2429-D creates a significant and adverse condition for the community, which requires the moratorium so that the community can decide at a later date whether to opt in and to adopt local regulations pursuant to Section 2429-D. 3. Moratorium. Except for those businesses or operations in existence and operating with an approved City of Saco business license as of June 28, 2021, no new marijuana use, business, operation, or entity shall be allowed or authorized in any zone, location, or property within the City of Saco. The City Council expressly intends that this moratorium shall apply to any and all pending applications, licenses, and permits filed within the city anytime between January 11th, 2021, and this date as allowed pursuant to 1 MRS Section 302. 4. Scope of moratorium. This moratorium is intended to apply to any person or entity that will grow, harvest, process, store, manage, market, sell, distribute, transport, or advertise for sale any marijuana, marijuana plants or seeds, or marijuana-derived product. All retail sales of marijuana are expressly prohibited in all zones and properties of the city except where they are grandfathered as set forth in Section 3 above. 5. Duration. This emergency ordinance shall expire in 61 days. However, the City Council reserves its right to reenact this emergency ordinance for an additional 61 days prior to its termination.
Any further discussion on the emergency moratorium language that Councilor McPhail has read into the record? Councilor Archer.
Yeah, so with this, I don't like the 61 days that we're doing again, because I really do want this wrapped up as a yes or no eventually from the council. However, I do believe we need one because I can't table this motion. Tomorrow, we have it's going across the planning board, and I want their input. I want to know what they have to say. I can't table this unless we have an emergency meeting because this ordinance, or this current one, will expire before our next meeting. So rather than 61 days, I'd like to amend it down to, actually, I think it would be best to have a date. About a month. What would be the best meeting for you, Mayor, if we were to push this forward? Give or take a month. I just want to make sure, one, we're not pushing it down, kicking the can down the road, but also recognizing that there's new information coming to us that we don't have at this time.
Due to the meetings of the council and meetings of the planning board, which I can't really tell you what the planning board is looking at for items coming before them for consideration, I would advocate that we follow the city solicitor's advice just in case things pop up as we get into the holiday season. So that would be my recommendation, because I'm just not sure how fast they will be able to turn it around, get the information back to us, and then when it gets on the docket for us.
And it's also, my interpretation is that the council at any point can cancel this moratorium, correct?
You can end it. It's an ordinance, so you could repeal it.
You
repeal it.
Yeah, you can repeal it.
Yes, so it can actually be done quicker if needed.
Yeah.
I believe that's the way it could go. Because you're setting this duration for 61 days, so you'd then have to go back and make a motion to repeal this, and I'd want to get legal opinion on that, on what that does to the time in between.
Yes, understood. And I just didn't want to throw out an arbitrary date, so.
Any further discussion? Councilor Purdy, then Councilor Gunn. Councilor Purdy?
Thank you. I just wanted to I agree with what Councilor Archer just said. This isn't something I want to perpetually kick down the road, but I do want the information coming from the planning board, and if we can wrap this up sooner than the additional 61 days, all the better. I said but I want the information, and I would like to make sure this isn't something I want to continually revisit. I want to get it done and done right the first time. Thank you.
Councilor Gunn?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to piggyback on Councilor Archer and Councilor Purdy's comments. This gives me no pleasure to continue to increase the moratorium, but the simple fact is it's still in front of the planning board, and the planning board is doing their due diligence and acting in good faith to finally, we're no longer kicking the can down the road. We're actually discussing the issue, and we're actually taking some action. Whether or not it's going to be the actions that people in the public or the business community eventually like is irrelevant to the process at this point, though, right? This council is not on anyone's timetable but our own in terms of doing what is proper in terms of procedure. The planning board is talking about it, discussing it with the public, as is their duty, and then once they are done and we have all the information, we can make a decision. To Councilor Archer's point, I wish it would be a little quicker by the end of the calendar year, but no point in doing it fast if we don't do it right. So, well, as I said, while it gives me no pleasure to continue the moratorium because I really wanted to get this done for the simple fact that it's been we legalized recreational marijuana 5 years ago as a state, and the state has continued to crawl along on this issue, and municipalities have sort of followed the lead. At the same time, might as well do it right, and that's how I feel about that.
Thank you. Councilor Berman?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I've said, each time we've passed this ordinance, there is harm to waiting. Well, perhaps there's some confusion about the current state of marijuana laws in the city. Right now, we have businessmen and women who are trying to open businesses in our city that are confused as to the state of our current regulations. We just learned that we're the only city in southern Maine with a faster growing population than jobs, but we have two gentlemen sitting in front of us who want to create jobs. In addition, we've heard from the attorney from Drummond Woodsum, whose name I missed, that some of the emergency may be an emergency of our own creation by our own confusion. And that has continued through a series of meetings over the last, now almost our third renewal of this emergency ordinance. It simply can't continue. And the only reason why I think it's worthy of support is that we haven't somehow managed to get any ordinance or bill that creates any kind of sense of stability for the community or plan going forward through this council. We've done the first reading on some definitions that would clarify where dispensaries might go. Our planning board is currently considering whether we want to opt in or not to retail in medical and or adult use. And we have no clarity, so nothing to replace this moratorium with, but this moratorium does cause harm. Right? It creates confusion, it creates uncertainty, it's costing money and jobs and resources. And so it's not safe, it's not the conservative view. We need to make progress on this. And I just really want to reemphasize that the current status of renewing this moratorium just cannot be allowed to continue.
Thank you. Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. I believe just about every other councilor has said it, but I think Councilor Gunn said it very well with, there's no sense in doing this fast if it's not done right. And right is really a community decision. It's not one or two members of council or members of the public. It's the community at large. And hopefully they'll come out and participate in that process and deciding where these uses should be zoned. I can personally speak to my own experience with this. I myself, on behalf of a property owner, turned down a very largeable sum of money when there was a prospective use, and I looked at it and said, well, I don't really understand whether or not it's allowed, and be my guest to go elsewhere. But as Councilor Berman said, there are people looking to make use of this now legal use, and so I will say that I agree. I for one would certainly not be in favor of another 61-day moratorium. So I'm hoping that the planning department is hearing that, and I totally get how busy that can be. But I would say that this needs to be made the #1 priority. Obviously, you have to follow statutes, but I think it's known. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion on this item? Roll call vote on this item. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
No.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 6-1. That brings us to item 10, which is new business, 10A, Chapter 175, Senior Tax Assistance Discussion, page 157 of your packet. Finance Director Salas, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. This is my first time presenting with the new system, so just give me a few minutes to get set up.
They say technology makes it much easier, but in most cases, I find the technology is sometimes problematic when I go to use it. But we've got it now up and running, so.
Good, okay, yes. So. All right, next time it'll be faster. All right. So this evening, coming before you to present a review on the Senior Tax Assistance Program based on some research that was done prior to my leave, as well as over the summer. And I do want to thank Tori Gorman and administration for the hard work that she put in, along with some of our local partners, specifically Jean Saunders, I know, supported Tori a lot in her research on the information that we use to build these recommendations. So I'm sure most of the council is familiar with our current tax assistance ordinance, which provides an opportunity for senior citizens of the community to work off a portion of their taxes up to $1,200 annually, or 100 times the state of Maine minimum wage rate by working 100 hours as volunteers on behalf of the city. We have, because of everything that's happened with the global pandemic over the last year and a half, identified that there is a challenge in having enough work opportunities to meet the demand for the program in the community. Additionally, because these volunteers are actually employees of the city, there's a significant administrative burden in terms of payroll, managing what this looks like in the payroll system, collecting Social Security taxes, issuing W-2s, et cetera. When interim HR Director Emily Roy and I came to Brian with our concerns about this program, we were challenged with making sure that any alternative program would minimize the financial impact to our prior program participants, minimize the unnecessary administrative load, and also per the state of Maine statute, it does need to be a progressive program based on financial need. So we cannot issue tax assistance that's a flat benefit. Based on that information, we did come up with 3 options. A maintenance of benefits option, a PTFC match. PTFC stands for Property Tax Fairness Credit Program, which is the state of Maine's income and property tax burden-based income tax credit program, and then a zero tax impact option, which essentially means no change to the mill rate, current program cost. So the first is the maintenance of benefit. So at a minimum, our current work-off participants can receive $1,200 for their time working for the city, plus whatever it is that they were getting for the Property Tax Fairness Credit Program. So if we were to guarantee that no prior program participant were to lose any benefit, we would have to budget sufficient funding for $1,200 for all Property Tax Fairness Credit recipients in the city of Saco to receive that flat $1,200. And then I have an additional 10% match there, again, because it does need to be progressive. So if we do a 10% match of the PTFC, we have a small amount of progression in the benefit. That would be a significant expense based on the number of PTFC recipients in the city of Saco that are at least 65 years of age. That would be $324,550 per year, or about 9 cents on the mill rate, based on sort of the mill rate calculator we used for the fiscal year 2022 budget process. The second alternative is a 100% PTFC match. Now, the PTFC program is up to $1,200, so the most in need applicant with the highest property tax burden can receive up to $1,200. So if we do a 100% match to the PTFC, then our most in need senior volunteer program participants would still be receiving that $1,200 from the city, because they would be getting $1,200 from the PTFC and $1,200 from the city. Again, there's a significant number of participants receiving a significant amount of credit from the state, so a 100% PTFC match would be $149,495 per year, or 3 cents estimated on the mill rate. The final option is a zero tax impact. So basically, to calculate this program, I took the $60,000 that the council already appropriates on an annual basis per year for the senior volunteer program, and there was a $500 tax assistance program built into the current ordinance. So we budget $60,000 per year for that, and I took that amount and divided it into the total PTFC benefit currently being received by Saco residents, at least 65 years of age, and that's about 40%. I do want to talk about this third option a little bit more because, and I got some really great information from Brandon, who's the deputy tax collector up in Brunswick and really passionate administrator for their senior volunteer program. There's a couple different things we could do with the $60,000. We could say we could accept all applications up front, and then maybe it would be up to 100% of the PTFC that the applicants are receiving if we didn't have all that many applicants in a particular year. We can make the $60,000 an annual appropriation that rolls into a special revenue fund. So if we don't use the full benefit in one year, the balance of that can roll forward to the next year, and then we'll have more money for the participants to receive. So we can do a couple different things, but I would say, if we want to say what is the, what sort of the minimum, the impact that could be there, we're looking at a 40% PTFC match for all applicants if every single PTFC recipient applies to the city of Saco on a $60,000 per year annual appropriation. So these are the three options on the table, and I wanted to accept some counselor questions and feedback about these options to get a sense of which direction we should take in writing an ordinance revision.
Director Salas, which of these three options makes people whole for what they've lost, as far as they haven't been able to volunteer and work off that 100 hours, and therefore what they've lost in their property tax abatement or tax?
So the first one, the maintainer benefits, guarantees that someone's made whole, right? Because there's no progression in the senior volunteer benefits. So in theory, a participant could have been getting $1,200 from the work-off program plus their PTFC benefit. And, anyone who participated in the program would earn that $1,200, so there wasn't really a cap. So that's why I said, okay, well, if we want to guarantee that every participant is going to get the full amount that they used to go with the program, we have to go with this maintenance of benefits program.
Thank you. Councilor Berman?
Yeah, thank you. I actually want to follow up on that question, and I'm just confused. I'm not as familiar with this program as I ought to be. So currently, we budget $60,000 per year for this program. But if we maintain benefits at $1,200, it's now going to be $324,550. And so I'm just confused by those two things, right? How if we maintain benefits, it's going to cost more than the current allocation. Can you just walk me through that?
Sure. There was sort of a natural limit on how many participants wanted to receive the $1,200 benefit because you had to work 100 hours for the city. So, we kept the participants based on the number of available positions. At the time with the train station, pre-COVID, we had so many positions open. And so there were that many people. It was never very clear in our ordinance really what our limiting factor was in terms of participants. It sort of was set by available positions. And also, again, not everyone over the age of 65 wants to work 100 hours at minimum wage to get a tax benefit. So now there's no limiting factor in terms of having to put in time to work for the city. And we don't have any other way of, how do we say no to someone? Does it become a first come, first serve? I mean, that's another option where we could say we're just going to approve benefits as they come in until it's $60,000 if the city wants to just stick with the $60,000. But then again, somebody who's late to the program, late to the application process, who was participating in the volunteer program, they aren't going to be made whole.
So it's maintaining the maximum possible benefits they could have received,
correct,
not the actual benefits they did receive.
Correct, right.
Thank you.
City Administrator Kennereth.
Yeah, thank you. So we are expanding the potential number of participants here over what we are currently doing. And remind me also, Glennis, this is for ages 65 and up.
Yes.
The current work-off program, was that also 65 or was that 70 and up?
It was 65 and up.
okay.
Yep. Yep. Counselor Hatch?
Counselor Hatch.
Yes, thank you. Can you give us some insights as to how our program has stacked up against other municipalities, just so we can have some basis for comparison? Maybe starting with the current program, is that unique? What are other municipalities doing with this program? That would be helpful.
Yes, so the current work-off program, as far as I know, is unique to Saco because of the administrative load of, having these participants who are essentially volunteers but are actually employees. The complexity of managing it has been a barrier to entry for a lot of other communities in standing up a work-off program. I do know there are a number of other communities that do some kind of tax assistance, specifically Brunswick, where I spoke a lot with the deputy finance director about their program. They do a match to the property tax fairness credit, and basically they have a certain amount of money, and then it's distributed to the applicants proportionally based on their PTFC, up to matching 100%. I don't have a really neat analysis of every single other community and what they're doing. I do know that Gene Saunders had done some work on that. I think so had Tori Gorman, so I could work with them to have some kind of summary report on that. But it's not uncommon for other municipalities to have some kind of tax assistance program and to tie it in some way to the PTFC, because the state of Maine is doing a lot of the hard work of income confirmation and property tax burden for us.
Any further questions? Councilor McPhail?
Thank you. Does this change the income rates that we were previously using? Because I noticed like on the second option, those with higher income levels or the lower taxes, it can vary. So are we still setting the same income limits?
The income limits are roughly comparable. Our income limit was a little bit lower than the PTFC. So basically, anyone who previously participated in the program would still be able to participate in this new program. It just, depending on their income and property tax burden and the number of applicants and the total benefit approved by council, their benefit may vary.
But it could open it up to a few more because the income limit is higher than what we originally
I believe
were
the
doing?
income limit is within $1,000, so probably not
okay.
going to change the total
Not
number
a
of
large.
people.
Councilor Archer.
So one of the things, especially in my field, we look at comparable benefits. So you go for the federal dollars first, state dollars second, local, and then nonprofits, all that good stuff. Do we encourage our citizens, before they go to this program, to use Senator Bailey's new program that will pay all your taxes, your property taxes? And if we're not, why are we not encouraging that one first, and then using this as a redundancy, a backup to fill that gap, or whatever you want to call it?
Yes, I do know that program just passed, I
Yes.
believe, and they are still working on setting up how to administer the program. I would imagine that the income requirements are probably more restrictive versus the property tax fairness credit. But I'm not closely familiar at this point with what qualifies someone to participate in that
Because under
program.
the social service delivery model,
Yeah.
it would be in the city's best interest, the citizens' best interest, to first apply for the state funds first. If accepted, then this would not be needed. And then for anybody who is in that gap, who misses, maybe their income is different than our barriers, or not barriers, but our limits, that this program applies to them. That would lower the mill rate, the cost provided by the citizens of Saco, but still provide the benefit.
Yes, and we could certainly work with our partners in general assistance in ensuring that anyone who comes in a state of need is pointed to those programs. Denise Pendleton, who's our tax collector and works very closely with those who may be struggling a little bit with their tax bill, would also be a great resource, and she's very good with working with our citizens and helping them understand the benefits available to them. I do think that it would be certainly a good idea and responsible for us in the finance department to be encouraging taxpayers to apply to the property tax fairness credit, because a lot of people may not be aware that they're eligible for that program. If we were to say, if you're participating in the state program, you don't qualify for local funds, we could certainly write that into the ordinance. That would be a little bit different than what I proposed here, but certainly something that could be added for discussion.
Because in the end, like, I brought that up because in the end, the citizen in need gets what they have, and it doesn't create a tax burden to our citizens, so it's a good wash. And again, we can be less restrictive than the state to meet needs of other senior citizens who don't necessarily qualify for program Tier 1, and we provide Tier 2. Because in the end, it's about making sure that they can age in place. The other part, you mentioned option 1, you said $1,200 flat benefit, but then you also tell us the requirements for the alternative is it cannot be a flat benefit. It's the next page up.
Yes, so it's a $1,200 benefit, and then we would take their property tax fairness credit amount and match it at 10%, which provides a small amount of progression.
Okay, so you got progressive program based on financial need cannot be a flat benefit, and then you present option 1 that says no flat benefit.
$1,200 flat benefit plus a 10% match to the applicant's property tax fairness credit benefit. So let's say they're getting $1,000 from the state of Maine. They would get $1,200 plus 10% of $1,000, so $1,300. Whereas somebody who's only getting $500 from the state of Maine would get $1,200 plus 10% of $500 for a total benefit of $1,250.
Okay, because the page ahead of this, I guess, is what's leading to my confusion. I guess not that one. It's hard to tell. It's page 158 on here. It says current challenges, requirements for alternative.
Yes, so
there it is. So cannot be a flat benefit.
Yes, the maintenance of benefit is not a flat benefit because it starts with $1,200 plus. So let's say, like I said, if a applicant is receiving $500 from the state of Maine, they would get 10% of $500 for $50 plus $1,200. So your total benefit is $1,250. An applicant who's getting $1,000 from the state of Maine would receive $1,200 plus 10% of their $1,000 benefit from the state of Maine for a total benefit of $1,300. So in that way, there's a small amount of progression because someone whose income and property tax burden entitles them to $500 from the state of Maine would receive $1,250 from the city of Saco. But someone whose income and property tax burden is such that they receive $1,000 from the state of Maine would receive $1,300 from the city of Saco.
Okay, I guess I'm just confused with the requirement. The requirement cannot be a flat benefit, but then we put in the flat benefit.
So it's not a $1,200 flat benefit. Every participant would receive a different amount. So it's $1,200 plus. So I'll do it one more time.
No, I got it now.
You got it?
It's just, I understand I believe in progressive because we all have we have a pot of money. Progressive allows us to serve the most amount of people with the best need. That part I got. It's just when I was reading it, said cannot be a flat benefit, and then you're saying option 1, here's a flat benefit.
Perhaps I should have said just $1,200 plus. But it is slightly progressive. It's not a very progressive policy, but because the flat minimum amount is so high and everyone will be entitled to that.
Progressive gives it to the most amount of people, which I do believe in that format.
Councilor Archer, when you referred to Senator Bailey's bill, was that the tax deferral bill?
Yes, that is correct.
Thank you. Finance Director Salas, we already have a tax deferral program in the city of Saco. We've used, Councilor Johnston, you may remember this, when we did tax abatements a while ago, back under Finance Director Cheryl Fournier, where we did tax deferral financing for abatements. So it's not unheard of for us to do that, but just putting it out there that it is an option. We have done it before.
Yes. Under current municipal policy, those who are in need can go through the poverty abatement process, which allows the council to review their income needs and abate a certain amount of their tax burden. Or alternatively, they can apply for foreclosure deferral, essentially going on a payment plan. Council can elect whether to accept certain amounts, given how fast the debt will be paid off, but typically we do try to keep people in their homes, and as long as they're making payments regularly, we don't foreclose or it will automatically foreclose, but we don't take possession of the property or sell it.
That's not the tax deferral.
It's not a tax, we don't have a true tax deferral similar to what the state is doing.
Because I would caution against going the abatement. This is a better program than the abatement.
For sure.
Just because of how abatements work. But again, you have that state program, we have this that pretty much is leveraging your property where you don't have to pay anything. And that adds up over time, and then once that person passes, then the city, in this case, the state program, the state will get the money, but they'll provide the money to the city every year.
Yes, and in that case, of course, they also, a participant in the tax deferral program wouldn't qualify for tax assistance from the city of Saco because any program we put forward would be capped at the amount of property tax payments that the applicant is paying, and in the case where they're participating in that program, that they wouldn't be paying taxes at all, so.
Councilor Berman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The two values I've heard other councilors express that also match my own are that we do our best to attempt to make people whole as close as we can with our current program, as well as having a progressive program that helps ensure that those in the most need get the most benefit. In my mind, your middle program, the PTFC match, is the one that best accomplishes that. Those in the greatest need can still get up to the $1,200 per year. It also is a progressive program that ensures that those in the most need are the ones that can get the entire former benefit, while also having only a modest effect on the mill rate. So if you're seeking guidance on how to move forward with pushing people towards the state programs when possible, that would be my preference.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Okay. Councilor Hatch, will you be the council liaison for this item? Thank you.
Okay.
So this will be coming forward to the council at an upcoming meeting soon.
Yes, as it is an ordinance change, we will be looking to, it'll be a 3-meeting process, 2-meeting and public hearing.
Any discussion, any questions? Finance Director Salas, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
That brings us to item 11, administrative updates at Administrator Canrath.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. ARPA funds, we have them. It's good. I'm happy to report that we have officially received our first disbursement of American Rescue Plan funds in the amount of $1,054,256. Finance Director Salas has created a special revenue account to house those funds, and we will receive our second disbursement next year. We do have through the end of the year 2024 to spend these funds within guidelines, so it might be a good idea in the near future for the council to have an exercise how to prioritize the use of these funds, but we do have some time to spend them. Our election coming up this November 2nd, just an update as of today, we have issued 1,180 absentee ballots. The last day to request an absentee ballot is Thursday, October 28th, unless you have a special circumstance. There will be extended hours on October 28th from 7:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. Here at City Hall to accept voter registration applications, as well as issue absentee ballots. The polls will be open on November 2nd, Election Day from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., and you may also, of course, register to vote at the polls on Election Day. We had a remarkably successful employee appreciation event last Wednesday with well over 100 city employees who attended, which, from what I heard, is a record. So thank you to all city staff who were involved in organizing this event and putting it on. It was a great success. We've received extremely positive feedback, and it does appear to be our largest event ever. So we hope to build on this even further next year. So thank you all who helped organize this, and thank you to all the employees who attended and joined us there, and also got to check out our new Public Works facility. Some quick updates from Parks and Rec. This week, Parks and Rec will be preparing to wind down the summer season by taking in the beach mats, closing down the Bayview Beach bathrooms, and shutting off the water at the dog park. So thank you all for a good 2021 season, and we'll see you next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for City Administrator Kainrath? Okay, moving on. Item 12, council discussion and comment. Any council discussion and comment this evening? Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. Let's see, I know I got something jotted down here. All right. I don't see the city planner anymore, but I noticed that the Driscolls are on the planning board meeting tomorrow night for the site plan, and I just wanted to readdress the need for that public easement. It's just, having done this 8 years now, I've found it more often than not when we have these special circumstances that are tied to contract zones, they kind of fall by the wayside. And so I would just bring that up to the administrator. Perhaps he can relay that to the planning director. I'd like to see it and have proof of it, because it is something that was required. And again, that's really what met the test for me on that particular item as far as the public need. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further council discussion and comment? Moving on to item 13, executive session. Is there a motion to enter executive session? Anyone?
Be it ordered that the City Council enter into an executive session pursuant to MRSA Title I, Chapter 13, Subchapter 1, Section 4056, collective bargaining agreement, and update from legal counsel.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilor Hatch. Any discussion?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Johnston.
Thank you. Council all received an email from, I believe it was Attorney King, just questioning how we enter executive session and just seeking clarity in the future on that, because this has been a subject that has come up with myself and prior counselors like Eric Cody as far as what we have to list under executive session. So I guess if Mr. Murphy could give us an actual opinion on that, it'd be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. City Administrator Kainrath.
Yeah, I will just say for the public's information, the city solicitor did sign off on these particular categorizations today, just that we were in the right by how we've listed them, and we have been using these same labels for quite some time, I believe. So it is our city solicitor's opinion that this is adequate, but we could get a more formal opinion from him just to settle it.
Yeah.
Maybe we could check with MMA as a backup to the city solicitor. Any further discussion? A roll call vote to enter executive session. Councilor Archer?
Aye.
Councilor Purdy?
Yes.
Councilor Gunn?
Yes.
Councilor Berman?
Yes.
Councilor Hatch?
Yes.
Councilor McPhail?
Yes.
Councilor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to enter executive session at 8:53. We will be downstairs in the conference room. Okay, looks like everybody's back. Is there a motion to exit executive session?
So moved.
Counselor Gunn, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor Hatch. Any discussion? Roll call vote to exit. Counselor Archer?
Aye.
Counselor Purdy?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Berman?
Yes.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor McPhail?
Yes.
Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 at 9:29. Under item 14, is there a motion from executive session?
Yes,
Counselor
Mr.
Purdy?
Mayor. Yes, Mr. Mayor, there are two of them. The first one is a motion, I'd like to make a motion to authorize the city administrator to enter into a settlement agreement that resolves all claims alleged against the city of Saco by an individual.
Motion's been made by Counselor Purdy. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor Hatch. Any discussion? Roll call vote. Counselor Archer?
Aye.
Counselor Purdy?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Berman?
Yes.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor McPhail?
Yes.
Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. Counselor Purdy?
A motion to authorize the city administrator to enter into a contract agreement with the Saco Public Safety Support Unit through June 30th, 2024.
Motion's been made by Counselor Purdy. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor Berman. Any discussion? Roll call vote. Counselor Archer?
Aye.
Counselor Purdy?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Berman?
Yes.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor McPhail?
Yes.
Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0. That brings us to item 15. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Counselor McPhail, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Counselor Hatch. Any discussion? Roll call vote to adjourn. Counselor Archer?
Aye.
Counselor Purdy?
Yes.
Counselor Gunn?
Yes.
Counselor Berman?
Yes.
Counselor Hatch?
Yes.
Counselor McPhail?
Yes.
Counselor Johnston?
Yes.
Motion passes 7-0 to adjourn at 9:31. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.